Joining me today is Jeff Krenner from Paradise Ponds and Waterfalls. Jeff, thanks so much for joining us today. I really do appreciate it. Let me start by asking you, what typically is the first question that potential pond owners looking to get your services ask you?
Well, there's actually a couple questions that come to mind. One is like how deep it should be, and also budget also comes to mind a little bit, and the location of the pond. So I'd say those three things are kind of the main things that come up: budget, location, and depth.
And what do you usually recommend, say, from a pond size?
Bigger is better. So the smallest pond that I'd suggest would be like an 8 by 10. Medium size would be like a 15 by 15 pond size. But yeah, definitely bigger is better. Just easier to manage it. More stable. It's going to be more stable with the more water that you have.
Right.
So the bigger you can go, the better.
So is there a minimum depth you would recommend?
Yeah, minimum of 2 feet. We like to build ponds 2.5 to 3 feet deep. You're gonna have some gravel in the pond and stuff. So if you just build it to 2 feet deep, the gravel is going to take up a couple inches of that. So we always shoot for about 2.5 feet deep, and that'd be fine for ponds not only in Georgia but even all the way up in Minnesota. In freezing temperatures, you want to be at least over 2 feet deep so the fish can stay in the pond all winter long.
Right, right. Now you'd mentioned gravel. I know you would use a rubber liner. Do you always cover that rubber with rocks rather than just a rubber base?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple reasons for that. One is it just protects the liner from the sun and UV rays. Also, it looks a lot more natural. If the water is clear, which everybody would hope that would be, you're not looking at liner folds and a black rubber liner. That won't look very natural.
Right.
And third, it provides a great home for bacteria to grow, beneficial bacteria that's going to help keep the water clear. You're making it a balanced ecosystem. It's kind of like going to a zoo or aquarium. Oftentimes you wouldn't see like a habitat with no gravel in it. That's
Right.
because they're trying to make it very natural for the animals and also a natural environment too, with bacteria to grow and things like that.
Right. Now, do you have any key signature elements that you're known for in your pond designs?
I think my pond designs just generally just making it look natural, like it's always been there. We do some great waterfall and stream work with the waterfall drops, but I think generally speaking, just making sure that it looks very natural. It's a natural part of the landscape. It's not something that looks like a volcano or something that looks unusual to be there.
What about plants? What type of pond plants do you recommend and do you typically put in?
Sure. There's a large variety of pond plants to choose from. Depends a little bit on the amount of sunlight that the pond is going to receive. One of my favorites are just floating plants, which are water hyacinth and water lettuce, because not only do they shade the pond from the sunlight, but the root system that floats in the water pulls up nutrients that algae could potentially use. So they act as a filter and they shade the water. There's a whole variety of irises and lily pads you can get, a lot of marginal plants, creeping jenny. So it's really neat. It's pretty hard to kill a pond plant because they're already in water.
Let's go to fish now. What is the number one choice? I think I know the answer, but what's the number one choice people ask you for and do you recommend fish-wise?
Yeah, so koi would be the number one choice. With koi fish, you just have to make sure you've got a larger pond, though, and a deeper depth of at least minimum 2.5 feet deep. Koi fish grow large, up to 2 feet. So you definitely want to have that larger pond size, minimum maybe 15 by 15 and 2.5 to 3 feet deep.
Do you have any concerns or hear of any problems ever mixing the koi and the goldfish together? I know they are sort of cousins.
Yeah, yeah. Koi and goldfish are fine to go together. And actually, there's a third pond fish called the golden orf, which is also related to them as well, and they all mix just fine.
Is there how many fish? How do you decide on how many fish would go into a pond? Is there a limit, rule of thumb you use as far as weight of fish per gallon of water?
There are a couple of calculations out there that can be used to determine the amount of fish per pond, but really it just using judgment also depends on the filtration system as well. You think like fish farmers and another aquaculture, they have fish packed in there quite a bit, but they have advanced filtration systems and flow-through systems.
I know that koi and goldfish are, being a pond owner myself, are quite hardy. Do you ever come across illnesses with the fish in the ponds?
Yeah, so just like humans, fish are going to get sick from time to time. It most always happens during the introduction of new fish from your local pet store or wherever your online place, wherever you're getting new fish. These new fish are going to bring new disease to the existing population. So it's very important to quarantine your fish if possible.
Another a big issue with pond owners, of course, are predators, pond predators and your fish predators. How do you recommend people deal with predators, and what type of predators would the fish have?
Yes, so the most common predators for pond fish is blue herons. So just a really large fish-eating bird. There's really not one solid answer that's going to deter this bird from coming around to your pond. So it's going to take a combination of different things: sound activated things, motion activated devices. Artificial swans do really well because swans are really aggressive. So you can get some a floating swan. Like I said, you can hang things from the trees that are reflective. Anything that makes noise. But it's going to be a combination of things to keep the heron from coming away. And by the time you've seen the heron in your backyard, eating a fish or two, unfortunately, it's already been coming there for a while and knows a couple good spots. So whatever you can do to move. I've seen people use Halloween, decorations, motion active like scarecrows and stuff around Halloween time. Get some things on clearance and do something like that. And even pond netting too. The same pond netting that you'd use to keep leaves out of your pond in the fall, you can keep it up. Because in Georgia specifically, the herons are still around. They don't migrate, so they're still here. So to have that pond netting over your pond in the winter will protect your fish, because the fish are a lot slower at that point, so they're really easy targets.
Right. Oh, some good tips there. That's very good. What about, I know one of the bigger complaints that I hear from pond owners is algae. What do you recommend to help control algae, and if somebody has a problem with that?
Sure. Well, algae's going to exist in any pond. As you remember, they're not swimming pools or chlorinated bodies of water, so you're going to have some algae, and that's actually a great sign. With algae control, you're going to expect some algae in a pond because it is a natural body of water in your landscape. Thing is just to keep it within control. Measure them out. You don't want your pond to look like pea soup water or have tons of string algae in your stream. So there's bacteria additives that you can add. Also, the proper amount of pond plants and filtration also play.
So going into the cooler months now, obviously for us being further up here in the north, a lot colder, we have to deal with snow and ice. But any particular things you recommend to your pond owners as it starts to get a bit cooler?
Yeah, there's a couple key points actually in getting your pond ready for winter. It's not feeding your fish anymore if the water temperature, not the air temperature, but the water temperature has dropped below 55 degrees. And you can monitor that with a simple pool thermometer. Also, if you live in a warmer climate like southeastern states such as Georgia or Florida, you may transition your fish to a cold water diet.
What is cold water food?
So cold water pellet food contains more wheat germ in the pellet, so it's easier for the fish to digest as their systems slow down in the winter months.
Okay, that makes sense. Jeff, I want to thank you so much for taking the time with us today. I really do appreciate it, and I'm sure my audience will as well.
Sure, great talking to you. Let's keep in touch. I always enjoy talking about ponds.
Hope you enjoyed my interview today with Jeff Krenner. Before you go, please do check out one of the other videos you see here on the screen. And don't forget to subscribe. I'm putting out new videos all the time, and you'll be notified as soon as I do. And a thumbs up, always appreciated. Thanks for watching.